Okay. All right. What's up, everybody? How we doing here? Happy Friday, November 1st. November, the world's most depressing month, eh? Who the fuck likes November? Jesus, who likes November? We turn the clocks back an hour. We have to celebrate the fallen soldiers. I guess you guys in the US do get American Thanksgiving, which makes a lot more sense than in March, eh? March is March is kind of like, we need winter to end. Weirdly enough, I think my favorite month of the year is April, because it's kind of like we got through, particularly if you come from Canada, come from the colder parts of Canada. April's like the month where, patios start to open, some patios, depending on the weather, but like the snow's gone. It's kind of like, like the fingering of summer is beginning to happen. It's kind of like the countdown is on. It's kind of like the foreplay for summer. You're like, oh my God, like, it's not quite June or July, so it's not like the middle of summer. But April's like, oh my God, I can just feel that little tingling. I can feel that little tingling in my nuts. You know what I mean? Like summer is coming. We got through the winter. But yeah, March is not good. Basically November through March is all shit, except I like December. I don't know how you guys feel, but I like the month of December. I mean, December's holidays, and so you can kind of deal with December being like dark, cold, short days, because it's kind of like festive season, family, friends, by the fire watching movies. It's kind of snuggle season. People are having parties, and it's a lot more. But November is like the beginning of the dark season. Okay, Jamie, that's enough talking about the months here. How you guys doing? So what is it here? Friday, November 1st. I'm out east, so it's almost 4 p.m. my time here. If you guys are watching this, where are you guys tuning in from? I know Robin is coming in here from the Hudson Valley, which she what's it? Hudson Valley something, HVP, which sounds like a fuck. Look how dumb I am right now. I can't even think what like an STI. It sounds like an STI. My brain is not HVNY. Yeah, that for sure. Hudson Valley, New York. Yeah, for sure sounds like HPV. You know what I mean? For sure sounds like something. But how you guys doing? You guys holding in there? Are you guys hanging in there with all this antibiotics help? Yes, antibiotics always do help. Except they fuck up your stomach. And then when your gut gets fucked up, everything gets fucked up. But hope you guys are hanging in there. Hope, with all this crazy shit that's happening with this portal that seems endless, that doesn't seem to be letting up the vice grip. I hope you guys are hanging in there with this energy. So how you feeling, Robin, or anyone else who's watching this live here? How are you currently feeling? I'm going to be doing a Q&A here, and I have a bunch of questions here, and also just a bunch of people telling me what's a lie for them that I'll kind of riff off. I won't be able to get to everyone. I probably have like 15 different questions here. Different people just telling me sort of what they've been struggling with, what has been a lie for them, I guess, this week, these past few weeks. And so I'm going to get to as many of them as I'm able to, but I'm going to try to like keep them within like a flow of context without going off to too many tangents here. Robin W says it's endless, but I'm having awakenings. Yes, it is definitely endless right now. It feels so open and closing. Like, for example, for me, what was it? So today's Friday. So Wednesday night, I had like the craziest levels of anger and rage coming through me, like crazy levels of anger and rage. And when I have like anger and rage come up, it's a couple of things. It's like there's certain things from my past that keep getting replayed over and over. I don't know if you guys have ever had this experience, but I have like different things that keep getting replayed over and over whenever I have a lot of that anger and that rage or that primal energy begin to come up. And the reason why, first off, you guys, why that anger comes up in the first place is because you started to create some space. So you started to create some space and things started to move. So you started to access that anger. And one thing that happens when that anger comes for me is that it's, I recycle a lot of things from the past. And here's the thing, right? Sometimes you recycle things from the past and it's not like necessarily something that I haven't dealt with, but it was a situation in the past where I really, really remember not being seen or not being heard or experiencing some type of injustice. And it's not like this is like, I'm talking about like a trauma that I haven't processed. I'm talking about a situation where it was like that comes up as I reclaim more of my anger. Some of these past situations in my life get recycled and I'm like, oh, that really did not feel good. And there's nothing you can do about it in that situation, right? Because when your anger comes up, there's two things, right? So sometimes I'm recycling things from my past that just it was an experience where I was really not seen or heard. And other times it's because I'm not complete somewhere or there's some resentment. And then you ask yourself, is there something I can do about this? And I ask myself, is there a completion conversation that I'm able to have? Am I not complete with everyone? And so when a lot of space opens up for me, a lot of this anger and rage begins to come up. And it's this very, very directive energy where I just want to be direct. I just want to complete things. Ultimately, what happens is it's like a deeper reclamation of my reality. So when like a lot of anger comes, you have this deeper reclamation of your reality, meaning like I know this is my experience. I know this to be true, and this is what I experienced. And so when there were times in the past where maybe you experience a certain like injustice or something, that will come up when you begin to experience that anger. And so I recycle a lot of these things, and what I do, or sometimes where someone I wasn't heard or someone really didn't see me, and I recycle them and I move into this deeper internal process with myself. How can I own and claim more of my reality? How can I own and claim more of myself? And so I move deeper inward with myself, because what anger does is anger wants us to accept and own what we know to be true in our reality, right? So when we have a real difficult relationship with anger, we really get swayed what we know to be true. We have trouble making decisions. We have trouble knowing what to do. We have trouble executing and taking action on things. And then we always second guess our reality. We're like, well, maybe I was being too much, or maybe this wasn't true. But when you really come into your anger, you're like, you hammer down on your reality and what you know to be true. And so when a lot of that energy comes, and that energy was coming Wednesday night, and then yesterday, I remember because I was traveling to Toronto, which is where I'm at now. And I was walking through the airport and I was like literally like trudge walking. Like my legs felt like pillars and tree trunks. And I was like, felt like I was running that fucking entire airport. And I get onto the flight and it was so hot. I'm standing there. Usually flights are cold. It's fucking November too. The flight's so hot. So I'm pissed off. So in the middle of the flight we're checking on, I speak to the whole airplane. Everyone, a show of hands, put up your hand if you're too hot. We need to get some more air in here. And so I'm just like, that's what happens to me when I have this like primal anger and rage. Like I have to deal with everything. I can't like not deal with something. But then immediately what came, and don't worry guys, this is going to segue into the Q&A, but I just thought I'd open it up just with what's been alive for me the past couple of days. But after I access a lot of this power, this gang energy, then a lot of fear came and a lot of grief. So it was like anger oscillating between fear and grief. And it was like this crazy level of fear that came into my space, and then a lot of grief. And so really like in a span of like a day and a half, I've been like, I went from like rage and anger to like total fear and then total grief. And so if you look at something like that, okay, you're like, I opened up some space in my body. So the anger and the rage came, but then fear comes in, and I could only assume that fear is coming in because I'm starting to access like that primality within myself, and my body's like, oh shit, this is a lot, right? This is a lot. And your body's kind of trepidous. That's where the fear comes. And so your body's trying to like hold its capacity, to hold that level of primal energy. And that's where I was like, my system was like being so direct. And I remember like I was on the airplane and there was like this like really fucking weird dude beside me in the middle. And I'm just like, I get really funny when my anger comes through. And I just like say to him, first off, I was like, how are the facilities? And, this is a guy that not want to talk to me, but I would just like, I would turn to my right and just look at him. I would just look at him and just like wait for him to make eye contact. And I just was like fucking with him in like, a weird sort of comedic way. And so like, I get a little like unhinged when this sort of anger comes and just the comedic thoughts that come into my head. So I get, along with that primal sort of anger and rage, it's this real, like I'm kind of unhinged and I'll just kind of say anything. Right. And then the fear came. And then last night it was a lot of grief and a lot of density again. And so we move into this primal energy. Our body has fear. Oh shit, this is like a lot. And then the grief comes because it's trying to create even more, right? So that grief's trying to come to create even more. So it's this process where when you move into that primal energy, at some point grief is probably going to come. And the reason why it's coming is because rage and anger creates space for more grief, and more grief creates more space for more rage and anger. That's kind of how that process works, right? Where, like you notice that some people are really connected to rage and anger and struggle with grief, and then some people are really connected to grief but struggle with anger. When those emotions are really, really integrating, then we're going to oscillate between the rage and the anger and the grief. And like fear is kind of the in-between. And so basically the last day and a half, just to let you guys know what's been alive in my space, I experienced this real fucking roller coaster with those emotions where I was like, this like directive, like anger or like just, like I'm so in my fucking masculine when that happens. I'm like, I want to call people out. I need to be so direct. Someone's like, you want to do something? I'm like, fuck no, I'm not doing that. I just get very assertive. I like this. I don't like this. I want to do this. I don't want to do that. But then immediately what came after was like this crazy amount of fear. It was like, ooh, like just a lot of fear. Like I really felt this visceral fear in the space. And then the grief came after. And so that's just kind of like a, little snapshot into like what this portal has been like, because I typically go through a lot of different emotions. This is the way my vessel works and like how I process in being like a channel and a medium like that. But it's definitely more acute. Like the oscillations are happening more frequently and they're more extreme when they're happening. That's how I would kind of describe this portal. Because it's like so many episodes of crazy depressive energy where I'm just like, holy fuck, I'm so fucking depressed. But then something moves and you're like, whoa, like I have this big awakening from what I just moved. And so it's just like just to let you guys know, it's such a myriad of shit that's happening right now. It's such a oscillation of different experiences and it reflects a lot of what people have messaged in, which I'm going to get to now. What's Robin saying? It's like your body doesn't want you to go out and get in a fight. So the fear kicks in to keep a lid on the primal energy. I feel like the grief is a softener. Yes, Robin, I love how you said that. So 100%. So, and we can touch on this before we get to the question. So that's exactly it, Robin, with what happens. So the primal energy is like your power, right? It's, it shows up as rage and grief, but it's not really rage and grief. It's more like just your power. It's more like your life force energy is showing up, but it's very, and I wrote about this in my stories, it's very unintegrated. It's very unhinged, right? And so the fear kicks up because you're like, whoa, this is a lot. Like we think maybe I'm going to be destructive. Maybe I'm going to be dangerous. Maybe I'm going to hurt myself. Maybe I'm going to hurt other people. I won't be able to hold this. How are people going to respond to this? you're in the wide open, and then 100% the grief comes in, and the grief is really, as Robin said in the comments here, it's like a softener. It's like the grief's like an alchemizer. So the grief is really actually what starts to integrate that anger, right? And so that primal energy opens up space, and then that grief really allows that anger to move through the heart, which is why I posted, when that primal energy comes, you got to be careful. You don't want to act from that anger, because it's kind of like a stage 1 emotion at that point, right? It's like a stage 1 emotion, meaning it's primal energy that's unintegrated. And so this is not a good time to probably have a difficult conversation, to reach out to someone to try to complete something, because probably, and this is what happens to me, when that anger and that primal energy comes and I'm recycling certain things, I'm like, okay, I need to, and I discern, okay, I'm having some resentment here. I need to have a conversation, but I'll never reach out to someone when I'm in that anger. Because it's just going to be, it's like this really gang assertive energy, but it's lacking a little bit of that heart integration, right? And so, which means it's likely that because of that energy, you might create a little bit more conflict than connection, right? And so when that grief comes and that grief washes with the anger, now what can happen is you can use that anger, but you alchemize it with the heart to create connection, right? And so now you can actually act from this anger in a place that's a little bit more deeply vulnerable. And so, like, what happened in my space, and this is over the last day and a half, this process, the anger comes, and when that anger comes, you kind of feel like you can do anything. You feel like I can create anything. You feel so powerful. But then what really comes is so much unworthiness. So I was in this powerful energy that you start to feel, but then there's a lot of unworthiness, a lot of insecurity, a lot of a lot of fear, right? And again, it's kind of like the underbelly of that primal energy is now being revealed. That underbelly is being asked to be integrated, right? So that now, because sometimes that anger can actually happen from a place of maybe performative or more self-inflation, like a little bit of self-inflation from a wound, rather than when you sit with that anger and allow it to burn through your body, allow it to alchemize, the fear and the grief come, a lot of the deep unworthiness comes. Now what happens is you can be a little more connected when you respond. Like there's a couple people I want to reach out to have completion conversations, just with the energy's a little off and a couple connections. And so I want to reach out. And that really, really came up when that primal energy came. And I didn't, because I had to let that energy burn. And I probably will now in the next couple days, because that anger came, then the fear came, and then the grief came, which was allowing it to alchemize. So this is really a process of what it's actually trying to do, is to allow you to, in a very connected, a very integrated way, hold more power in your field, hold more primal energy, hold more archetypal divine feminine, divine masculine codes. And so essentially what was trying to drop in my body, you could say, was divine masculine codes. You could say was more levels of my power, more ancestral energy that I integrated, like reclaimed energy from the ancestral field that my ancestors weren't able to tap into, that's now coming through in my body. Deeper layers of unworthiness that we're beginning to integrate. So all these things we're trying to alchemize and connect into my space. And this has been so front and center the past 2 months, September and October, as we've been in this crazy portal, as you guys all know. And so this is happening at such an acute and deeper rate than normal, right? Which is why it's been so challenging, because it really feels like we can't find any homeostasis, or we can't find any balance. Like I've been in and out of frustration the past 2 months, because I'm like, I just can't get a break. Like I remember I was watching in bed last night, I was watching this romance movie, and I just was crying, and I was like, fuck, I'm so emotionally tired. Because I feel like these past 2 months, I don't know how you guys feel, I've been so fucking emotional, and such a range of emotions, and I've had so much different grief move through, and I was like, fuck, I'm so tired of having to process emotions. And it's just like so much has been moving through. And so definitely been in and out of that. This is a blessing, but then also frustrated with this process, because like it feels like your body is just like petrified, right? Your body begins to like, it like moves out, and then it's like, oh, like that's too much. Like it moves out, and then it's like, no, like that's too much. So it's so open and close, off and on, expansion to contraction. It's so fucking acute right now, which is why when I ask these questions, there were so many people who wrote certain things, because I think so many people can connect with all this shit that's happening. So I'm going to just read out some of these things here that people, okay. So this lady said, fear and anxiety in my solar plexus, and it feels negative and it's eating me alive. It comes in waves. Then there was a follow-up that she wrote. To continue my question, is this normal? I've been integrating DF, divine feminine, solar plexus anxiety, and fear energy. So I started with this one because, yeah, my solar plexus have been holding like crazy. So I don't know how you guys are feeling. My solar plexus, like ribs, like what I notice in my body is like my ribs literally ache. Like both my ribs ache, and my solar plexus is like ballooned out. And a lot of holding in my back. And so what's going to happen is like your ribs will really ache when like the ligaments in your ribs are really, really holding from a lot of holding in the back. And then combined with a lot of gut shit, a lot of holding in the gut. And so much of, so I've had so much holding in my back, my chest, my solar plexus, and my stomach. Kind of all these areas. And 100% fear and anxiety and panic is going to show up in the solar plexus, and it's going to show up in the stomach. And so I think I wrote about this in my stories too. But a big part of what is happening right now is we are downloading archetypal codes from the divine feminine and the divine masculine. And when it comes to, okay, how does this energy transmute in the body, right? And I talked about this in my stories, but the stomach is like the sacral drop. So the stomach and the solar plexus are like the waiting room for your power to drop into the divine transmutation that happens in the cock and the womb. And so what you'll really notice, it's so crazy because like I can be sitting there and tracking the energy moving in my body. Like I'll feel the energy in my stomach and I'll feel it move into my cock, and all of a sudden I start, getting horny and like thinking about like sex and like ravishing a woman. And I also just get really like in my masculine. So I can I feel the energy is literally dropping the stomach to the bladder. So the bladder is another place of holding. The bladder going down into the genitals and the sacral area. And I can literally feel, it's crazy. I can feel my thoughts, how my thoughts mirror where the energy is moving in my body. And so when the energy drops from the stomach down into my legs and my cock or womb, it's like, oh, divine masculine code, like code. But what's happening right now is it's so much energy that it's a slog. So it's moving so slow right now. Like imagine like a mudslide, like moving so slow. And there's so much. That's how the energy is right now. So usually this would happen, but I'd be able to move the energy a lot faster because your body wouldn't be so overwhelmed. But now there's so much and the energy is moving so slow. That's the problem right now. That's why we're in such a challenge, because we've been so influxed, right? And so I can feel my thoughts, what I'm thinking, mirroring where the energy is, Like when my crown, for example, gets really buried, meaning it's hit by a bunch of energy, like that's often where a lot of the like depression comes from, because my head is buried and that's where like things seem really bleak. Doesn't seem like there's a lot of possibilities for my life. I'm like I'm never going to create what I want to create. I'm never going to amount to what I want to or think I'm going to amount to. So when this gets buried, the field gets small and it gets really fear driven, right? But when this opens, all of a sudden I'm like, I can do anything. I can do anything. You know, I'm just dancing around. I'm listening to music, got a hop to my step. I'm a divine fucking being. Look at me go, baby. That's because my crown's opening. But when the crown closes, I'm like, bah, humbug. You know, I'm so sad. I want to eat shitty food. I want to isolate myself. I don't want to see anybody. That's when the crown is closed. And then, so when I can track it coming down, right? And then when it gets to the stomach and the solar plexus, it's like, oh my God, so much fucking fear. When you get to the stomach and the solar plexus, so much fear. So that's what's happening. This lady was commenting and she's talking, she's got a lot of fear and panic in her solar plexus. Yes, your solar plexus and your stomach is where that fear is going to be. And what it's wanting to do is it's wanting to drop into the womb or the cock and your root chakra, which now means that your field's going to expand like this. Your field's going to expand like this. And you're going to be able to hold it. And like when the energy is moving into my legs, I walk around, I'm like, motherfuckers, get the fuck out of my way. I own this fucking sidewalk. I own this city, bitch. Like that's literally what my thinking is when my legs, I'm like, I'm a fucking bull. I'm a fucking lion. You know what I mean? And that's what happens, right? So when that energy from the solar plexus and the stomach drops, it's like, you know, and I could feel the energy, like it literally felt like a French press. And I could feel it stuck in my bladder. I'm like, fucking energy, just get into the tip of my dick already. Just get into the tip of my dick. And then it went to the tip of my dick and I was like, okay, yeah, I feel that. Yeah, I get it. And so like, and then my thoughts would shift. It would go here as the energy dropped. My thoughts would change. It was fucking just, and it's crazy. And so that's happening so much right now, which is why our thoughts are going to be all over the place. You know, one minute I'm like, yeah, I can do anything. The next minute I'm like, I can't do anything. Like that's how this fucking shit is oscillating right now. So for the lady who's the fear stuck in your stomach and your solar plexus, yes, 100% is. And I would probably say these are archetypal divine feminine codes, probably codes that have been blocked in the ancestral realm, ways that the oracle in your sort of lineage has been blocked, that now since you're trying to move down into your sacral, into your womb in a way none of your previous ancestors were able to, which is gnarly business. The energy is going to do its thing, right? When it comes to, okay, I have this fear coming, first off, the most important thing is honestly not even really to do anything, to just trust that your body's going to know what to do with the energy and just to sit in that fear, right? And, you know, the number one thing I do to release and move energy is I lie in a bed and I really focus on the breath. I usually inhale for 4 and I exhale for 8. Helps to stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system. And then what's going to happen is trauma begins to move to my body. I go like this a lot. Like the whole body begins to shake. And that's going to allow that energy to drop. That's going to allow that energy to drop. Look, we got more orbs in the air. So doing some breathing practices, doing something like breath work, you know, placing your hands in your stomach, really just breathing into that area and just doing whatever you can to try to regulate your nervous system, whatever sort of tools that you have. The breath is really, really important because if you're holding in your stomach and your solar plexus because your system is dysregulated to some degree with the energy. And so the way that energy is going to move is if you slowly help orient your system into a space of regulation. But also right now, what is true is we're going to be experiencing such an oscillation. I use my voice as my voice is just catching all of a sudden. When that happens, I know it's fucking throat chakra is trying to open like a fucking pussy in my throat, you know? What was I saying? That you're dysregulated, so you need to move back into a space of regulation. Robin says, I use my voice. Yes. So much of the voice and Robin, yeah, we did this in the Ravished program, but so much of the voice is connected to the sacral, right? So you can, I mean, like, for example, you can go do like an or an O sound, like a reverberation, like you go, And you do that 3 or 4 times, and you can imagine that's going to help activate and stimulate the vagus nerve. But what you can do that will help to, well, you can imagine, sorry, the sound is coming from your cock or your womb, which is going to help bring that energy down. Because the energy holding in your solar plexus in your stomach is wanting to move into your womb and your root. But what's holding in your back will move into your root. What's holding your front will move into your sacral. And so using like an O, an or a VU breath, what I did in my Ravish program is you can even just make the sound womb, where you go, and you literally spell out womb, which is just a great reverberation. And imagine the reverberation is going all the way down to your womb, or to your, I guess you wouldn't do that if you had a cock. So it's going all the way down to your womb. But that reverberation will help to stimulate, activate the vagus nerve. And again, the reason why we're holding the solar plexus in the stomach is because our system is dysregulated. We're in a fight or flight. We're in a bit of panic. We're in a shutdown response. And so that will help activate the vagus nerve, which will help allow that energy to move. And the reason why right now, with everything that's happening, there's so much contraction, is because we're so dysregulated by what's happening. Because our system is like, anytime it has a break, it's hit and inundated with another fucking realm of energy, and then it moves into shutdown. And so the way that we can help support the movement of energy at a time like this is activating the vagus nerve, and figuring out what our system responds to. Different sort of nervous system practices, which, what I use in my practice, a lot of different self-touch practices. Also just talking to the energy, talking and guiding the energy. And it would be too complex for me to explain this sort of stuff on a live, but talking to the energy and basically guiding and directing where you want the energy to move. What do we got next? A lot of dense fear. I had a dream of an entity being cleared from a building. Heavy. And this person had another part to this. Where the fuck is it? God damn it, Jamie. Your process so this is the same question. They just had some follow-ups. So they had a dream about an entity being cleared from a building. Your process for how to actually move an ancestor through. Also, I can't discern if it's ancestor or succubus energy related to sex trauma. Okay, so how we move an ancestor through, a dream of an entity moving through a building, or an entity in a building, energy coming up, can't discern if it's energy related to sex trauma. Well, I would definitely connect that entities are most often, and fuck, I don't mean to get fucking heavy here. Jesus, it's a fucking Friday afternoon. And I'm wearing some nice clothes too, but I guess we're going to talk about entities. So often when we deal with sex trauma, we're most often dealing with entities. When we're dealing with sexual abuse, we're most often dealing with an entity. So just based off this person, I would connect those two. Again, our dreams, and maybe people here have studied a lot more of Carl Jung or Jung stuff with dream psychology. I haven't studied a lot of it, but I do know that a lot of just, obviously it's kind of very not linear, but kind of into the subconscious, very sort of broken, fragmented sort of aspects of the subconscious. And if we had a dream of an entity and we have some sex trauma, then I would definitely connect those two, that is probably what's coming up and trying to move through your body right now, particularly because a lot of what's happening right now is related to archetypal divine feminine, divine masculine codes, which, if you think about it, if we're trying to move into archetypal divine masculine, divine feminine codes, what that means is that karma wants to transmute from the solar plexus in the stomach to move into the cock and womb, which is really where karma fully transmutes into a divine experience. But if we have a lot of sex trauma or entities, we're going to have a major sacral block, right? So meaning we could have a lot of issues in the solar plexus or stomach, I bet you we could have a lot of issues with the lower back, kind of in the kidneys and the root. The energy can't move. And so basically what it means is we're kind of stuck in the middle, right? When we have a lot of like sex trauma like that, what it really means is that we're going to be very, very fearful of our power. Because if we're in our power, then we can be exposed to the same abuse, right? If we move into our power, then all of a sudden the body, particularly the sacral or hips, our genitals are going to perceive a threat, right? Because we're moving into a space of openness where the sex trauma, the sexual abuse could be recreated, right? So the way that the body protects when we have the sex trauma, or we come from patterns of sexual abuse, is that we're going to shut down the sacral, right? We're going to shut down the womb. We're going to shut down our cock and our genitals. We're not going to access that part of ourselves. And we do so to protect ourselves, right? And when it comes to this portal for the past 2 months that we've been in, the energy is really, really wanting to integrate into the sacral and root. As I talked about, right, the sacral drop from the stomach, that's when we move into that primal energy. And so when we have a block with an entity or sex trauma, then we're going to have a block with our primal energy. We're going to have a block with our anger. We're going to have a block with boundaries. We're going to have a block with being really direct and assertive. We're going to be, enmeshed in some patterns of people pleasing, or being a chameleon. Like, how do we need to respond, right? Also, what can happen a lot of the times when we come from patterns of sexual trauma is like this very internalized, obviously, shame, internalized disgust. You guys, often when we're dealing with the emotion of disgust, a lot of times it's traced back to ancestral energy. So when someone has a lot of like, ooh, my skin's crawling, or I feel a level of disgust, almost always it's related to, it's really common with sexual trauma, but it's also really common with, we're holding ancestral energy. When we just have this level of disgust in our space, almost always it's going to lead us to an ancestral piece. And so when it comes to, okay, he has a dream about an entity in a building, and he's got this sex trauma. How do you move an ancestor through? Well, how you heal from sexual trauma and how you heal an entity is, for example, most people who, for example, say are pedophiles or incest abusers, they have an entity oftentimes that's attached to them. They have a dark energy that's attached to them. Like pedophilia, that's, really common, is they have demonic energy that's attached to them. And so when it comes to healing from this sexual abuse, what you have to do is you have to separate the entity from the abuser. And so when I separate an entity from an abuser, the entity's in front, the abuser's to the side, right? So say, we were a guy and we experienced abuse from a man, then whoever the abuser is will be off to the right and the entity will be out front. And then once you're able to separate the entity from the abuser, what you're going to notice is more raw emotions in the abuser. And this is really complex stuff, guys, and really in depth. But what you're going to notice, for example, say you experience like incest abuse from a man or something. And then once you separate the entity's here and the abuser's here, you notice, say, all this guilt. You notice all this guilt or all this shame in the abuser or all this deep, deep sadness. We actually have to move that emotion through our body. And you move it through the body and present it to the entity. So when I do this, facilitate this process somatically, what we have to do is we have to show the entity your power. So the entity's here, right? Entities are always outside of the body, right? Always outside of the body. And so once you separate the entity from the abuser and you process the undigested emotions of the abuser through either the left or right side of your body, now what's going to happen is you're going to show the entity your power. You're going to show the entity the power in your cock or the power in your right hip, essentially letting the entity know that you have no power anymore, And once you do that, and at first, The energy probably won't completely go away, but what will happen is you'll begin to create an experience where you're creating a new imprint in the body of what happens when you don't feel that energy, right? So when it comes to healing from sexual abuse and healing from sexual abuse where we feel we have entities that are stuck to us, and the entities will be stuck to us probably that were held onto from the abuser, who now has kind of this covert sort of hold on us energetically, right? That's a way they abuse kind of create these covert holds to not allow us to move into our power. But then once you present you and your power to an entity, you're beginning to create a new somatic imprint in the body, and you're showing the entity you don't have any more power. The entity will probably come back, but eventually once you get stronger and the neural pathways in your body become powerful enough, that entity will just dissolve and go away. And then whatever you feel with the abusers, you'll actually see the abuser without the demonic energy attached to them. You'll see them from, and most abusers like that will come from their own patterns of abuse. This is most usually generational, which is probably common why it come up now. So much generational stuff is coming up, which means a lot of generational abuse will come up, and sex trauma. But you'll see like almost that abuser and more of that victim space. You'll see that abuser, because often what happens with abuse is victims become the abuser. That's how the patterns persist. But then when you can view the abuser as a victim, it doesn't mean you allow them to get off the hook for what they did, but you see them, and then that emotion actually moves through you. And so because that's how they create a hold on you. That's why there's so many blocks in the sacral. And so when you digest their emotion through you and you show the entity your power, now what happens is it's a little bit safer to move into your cock energy or your womb energy. It's safer to move into your legs, into your hips, safer to move into your root. And so probably right now, this portal we've been in for 2 months, a lot of people are going to like whatever sex trauma that we haven't dealt with, it's very likely will come up now because we're trying to move into divine masculine, divine feminine, archetypal codes. And that's very fucking primal energy that's wanting to come into our body. And it's going to be blocks in the root and the sacral, right? So with people with this abuse, lower back pain, issues with the kidneys. I mean, kidneys is where we hold a lot of fear, right? Bladder issues, pressure on your bladder, stomach issues, digestive tract issues, a lot of holding in the solar plexus. And so that energy is holding, right? And again, it's wanting to move through. And so I guess coming back around this person's question, I would definitely say that it's the sex trauma or residual aspects of what haven't been dealt with that are coming up because you're trying to finally cross that bridge to move into like a sacral activation or more of a primal energy that you haven't been able to get to. And this is really coming up. So much stuff that hasn't been dealt with at an ancestral level, layers of the onion that need to be peeled are coming to the surface right now, guys. And so that's what I think about that. It makes a lot of sense. So your dreams are definitely connecting the dots to your sex trauma. Okay, what do we got here? Bear with me for a sec here, guys. Impatience. I just want to get to the other side of everything. Tired of being in limbo. Everyone else as well. There's not a lot to say to this question other than impatience. Yeah, I've had impatience and frustration too. And what we can say to that, though, impatience, frustration, we want this fucking portal to be over. It's like, I'm done portaling, God. Just let me be a divine being already. Come on, I'm doing everything you ask. Come on, just give me a fucking cookie here. Toss me a bone. The more we move into the frustration, the more we actually deny the process of what needs to move through. So yes, I have been moving into frustration, but then you got to bring yourself back. You got to bring yourself back and bring myself back here and understand that you're going through a process and you're having to feel everything. And when we move into a space of impatience, what's actually happening is we're not allowing ourselves to fully be within the embodiment of the experience. And so with whatever's moving through right now, we're really being asked to just feel it all the way through, as uncomfortable as it might be, right? And the impatience and the frustration ultimately comes from a level of lack of safety and a level of discomfort that we're like, I feel really uncomfortable. Like I want to feel comfortable. All right. And what's trying to happen right now is a different level of resilience, a different level of internalized safety is trying to be created. And the only way that we can do that is when we find ourselves getting impatient, when we find ourselves being frustrated with this process, to really bring ourselves back to ourselves and to say, I have to feel this all the way through. And this is going to last as long as it needs to last. And I have to have trust and unwavering faith in the process, that this is a process that is ultimately unfolding for my highest good and my highest evolution. Even if it does not feel that way right now, it even feels uncomfortable, even if it feels like I'm dying, and I'm dying in many ways, I have to allow the full alchemy and transmutation of this process to move through. And the more I fight against it, the more I'm resisting what I need to feel and what I need to know from this experience. And so we bring ourselves back to that prayer or mantra, then we're able to not, and often if you think about it, so much of the struggle is actually the resistance to the process. But when we actually allow, okay, there's a process of something I'm supposed to feel. And when we just trust and have unwavering faith that this is happening for my highest evolution, and we bring ourselves back to that and just, I can feel everything. It's not going to kill me. I'm going to be okay. At the end of the day, I'm going to be able to get through this, and I'm going to be better off, and I'm going to be stronger for this. And I'm going to be a more resilient person. And that is true. That is completely what's happening right now. I mean, what doesn't kill us makes us stronger. But what's trying to happen is there's a deeper sort of internal resolve that is trying to come through. But the only way that that internal resolve and resilience can come through is if when you really feel really uncomfortable and you really feel at the bottom in a lot of ways, and you have to find that resolve and that fortitude within yourself. Okay, there's certain things I need to do here. There's certain things I need to do, and I got to trust this process. And so what it's doing is it's harnessing more of the spiritual warrior. Like a time like right now, you guys, what it's doing, it's testing how much of a spiritual warrior are you, which is like a warrior of consciousness. When I say spiritual warrior, it means you can kind of handle anything emotionally and energetically, and you can alchemize and transmute that to be a more evolved, stronger person. And you trust your capacity to integrate in that way. And what that really is alchemizing a spiritual warrior. And so really what you have to think of right now is in another initiation. It's a rite of passage. A deeper warrior is trying to emerge. And when we think warrior, primal energy, those are very, very connected, right? Because what happens, you guys, is what really activates the spiritual warrior is that you go through a very difficult energetic, emotional, or experience of consciousness, of death, of identity shifts, of death and trying to ultimately birth and rebirth. What that's ultimately doing is trying to activate a level of primal energy that activates the warrior. So that primal energy, I talked about being on the plane and being like, everyone put their hands up. What that was doing was, it was a glimpse of this warrior that's coming through me. And then fear came because it's like, oh shit. But that's what's trying to break through, right? That's what's trying to break through. And I think right now, at least what I feel, I'm having glimpses of the deeper levels, because I've definitely accessed my spiritual warrior big time, but deeper levels of it are obviously being alchemized in these past couple months. And I've seen glimpses of that new space. I've seen glimpses of it. Haven't been able to hold it, but I've seen glimpses of it. And that's what's trying to break through. And so what you're going to notice, and this is just my intuition, kind of tuning into what I think is ultimately going to come from this, is things that were really difficult are going to be suddenly a lot easier. Your capacity to do things you would have struggled with in the past is going to be at a whole new level of capacity. Your capacity for conflict, your capacity to hold discomfort, your capacity to hold difficult emotions is going to expand exponentially in your body because of this. And so if you think about the difficulty that you're experiencing and the amount of discomfort that you're experiencing, it's priming. It's priming an inverse capacity on the other side, right? So if things are really hard right now, if you hold faith in the process, there's an inverse level of capacity for what it feels difficult now. As you transmute it, now you're going to create an inverse capacity to hold that in a whole new way. Levels of your dharma and your purpose that felt difficult to hold or felt a little out of reach are going to feel a lot closer. They're going to feel a lot more within reach, and you're going to feel like you have the capacity to execute on them. And so if we're feeling impatient, feeling frustrated, I'm feeling the same things, we have to come back to why is this happening? A spiritual warrior is trying to be created. A spiritual warrior is trying to be created. And what that means is when that warrior is created, you're going to be able to hold more of that primal energy, more of that generational lost primal energy that your ancestors weren't able to hold. Your body and vessel is going to be able to hold that energy, hold more of your power, more of your ancient power, which is going to increase your capacity. And you're going to feel the level of safety that you'll be able to pull from and source within yourself will be at such a deeper level. Like you'll be able to be in really gritty shit and be able to source and pull a sense of safety. And so we have to bring ourselves back to that. What else we got here? Exhausted, cramps, spotting, back pain, spaced out, dizzy, ears ringing, headaches, antisocial. Yeah. Robin says, it's training my resilience to access the gang. Exactly what it's doing. I have a gang sweater coming in the mail, which should be there when I get back from Toronto next week. So this lovely lady said, exhausted, cramp, spotting, back pain, spaced out, dizzy, ears ringing, headaches, antisocial. Yeah. So that just means your body is accessing a fuck ton of ancestral energy that it can't hold right now. A fuck ton of ancestral ancient energy. Where'd it go? Where'd it go? Exhausted, cramp, spotting, back pain, spaced out, dizzy, ears. Oh, yeah. Yep. Difficulty with the eyes, ears, jaw, mouth, ringing in the ears, dizziness, feeling like you're low blood sugar, headaches, density pressing down, sinus congestion. That's all going to be sneezing. It's funny. One of the number one ways I release ancestral energy is by sneezing. It's clearing the sphenoid, the sinuses. So what this lady is experiencing is just ancestral energy that can't move through her body. And what I will say is that right now, our root chakra and our sacral are really going to be responding to the crown. So the root chakra and the sacral are really going to be responding to the crown. And so because the root chakra and the sacral are wanting to absorb all that energy up here, right? So the energy comes in here and then presses down like a French press all the way into the ground, right? And so how open the sacral and the root will dictate how much that energy is able to move. And so if we've sort of been stuck in, say, exhaustion and we can't really get out of exhaustion and that's all we're feeling, it probably means we don't have the safety or the openness in our chakras for that energy to move. It's here and it can't move, right? But yeah, just to answer this person's question, that is just ancestral energy that is entering your field and it's stuck. It's not able to move. And so it's just going to be about having to, again, move the nervous system more into regulation, looking at other blocks in different chakras, in the throat, in the chest, all the different areas. And also identifying what the energy is. And so a big process I do in my practice is we identify kind of the origin root of the ancestral energy, which when you identify an origin root and you make the unconscious conscious, now the energy is able to move. And so that's stuck energy in the quantum ancestral field. So this guy is basically how to voice what's deep in me and then struggling to follow through on honoring that. Leaving, staying, long-term relationship when I feel it's old version of me that wants to stay. Okay, I feel even just, I know that's a guy, and that to me feels like a mother wound. If you're a guy and you move into a relationship, you can't speak your truth, you got a mother wound. You move into more of a people pleaser energy. And again, why don't we speak our truth, right? Because we're afraid to. And again, that's probably a lot of attachment trauma too with mom as well, which is trying to keep you within a relationship where you contract and shut down the voice. And if we were actually speak our truth in romantic relationship as a guy, what that's actually going to do is it's going to jeopardize the attachment bond. It's going to jeopardize the attachment bond. And so we contract, we conceal our truth, we people please, so that we don't have to experience a similar rupture that we experience when we're young. And so when guys can't speak their truths in romantic relationships, I've been there so many fucking times. And it had to become a learned process for me. So that's a mother wound. When we can't speak what's inside of us, when we can't bring it out, it's because it doesn't feel safe to. And I would say there's probably a deep attachment wiring, attachment break with mom, the body's trying to conceal and hold on to. And that will really show up that we're more passive in romantic relationship. We're not in our masculine. We can't lead the relationship. We can't be assertive. We can't say what we want. We can't dictate the direction of the relationship. And so to answer this guy's question, it feels like a mother wound, which is having to deal with the energetic imprint of mom, which is having to learn to be boundaried with feminine energy, having to learn to just come into our voice, our power, to speak our needs, to really being able to move into our own sort of independence in the world, and to be able to trust ourselves, to be able to lead ourselves, to guide ourselves. Because so much of like our capacity to really speak our truth in relationship will come down to, as a guy, will come down to our capacity to trust how we navigate our life as an individual. And so a really good rite of passage for guys who come from mother wounds is like really spend some time being on your own and really practice guiding and leading your life completely from your own energy. In fact, practice feeling the world all on your own energy, right? So a common thing when guys come from that mother wound is that they would have never really had an experience where they only felt themselves in the world, right? So typically what would happen anytime we kind of come up to that, we would look for another connection. We would look for another relationship. We would look for some forms of comfort to somehow bring some sort of security, right? Because if you think about like what happens to your guy, you can't be in your power in a relationship. You can't be to your partner, girlfriend, partner, wife, spouse. You can't be like, this is what I want to do. This is where I think we should go. This is what we should do. This is where we need to go. This is what we need to do. When you can't do that, essentially what it means is you're concealing some type of attachment trauma with the mother on the maternal side. And the way your contraction with your throat is holding on to that is concealing it so you don't have to. And so it's a lot of fear, right? Ultimately, it's fear. Because it's fear that if we move into our truth and our power, that we might re-experience that break in connection we experienced when we're young. And the way that we actually heal that really truly is we actually have to re-experience the break in connection. We have to actually go through, under different circumstances, experience that break in connection and learn to find our voice in sort of this open space where there's no one there but us, right? And so when a guy is able to recreate the experience of that break in connection from that early attachment trauma, which is going to be the deepest terror, fear, anguish in his body and system, the deepest pain and grief. Because if you think about throat chakra, a lot of holdings of the throat chakra can be related to early infancy. Think about when, like a lot of people who parents made them cry it out, who when they cried and the parents wouldn't come to co-regulate for the infant, it's going to hold in the throat chakra and the chest, but it's going to hold in the throat chakra and create a real shutdown in the throat. And so oftentimes that holding in the throat needs to actually be released somatically through the body through an early recreation of infancy. when we're like literally that terror and that fear is pouring out of our throat. So it's here, here, and here. The chest, the throat, and the face. The face is where we hold all attachment trauma. But when we go through that, and I talk about this in my work as the attachment rupture, when we experience this, now we actually begin to open the crown. Because what's happening is we're recreating the experience and the break in connection, which is probably going to create, an avoidant or an anxious or a disorganized attachment wiring in our body. And so when we experience that break in connection, the face begins to release to open the crown. The throat begins to open. And then as a guy, we can speak our truth in the wide open, meaning that we can learn to lead with our voice. We can learn to lead with our voice in a wide open space. That's kind of like the journey that a guy has to go through if he can't be in his power in relationships and has a mother wound and has this attachment trauma with mom. He has to, as an individual, be able to start kind of walking the path of his kingdom in the wide open space. He doesn't have to be a perfectly healed person, and he's going to have to heal this in relationship, and it's going to come up relationally, and it's going to be a point of learning to heal it and heal it with another person, with a partner. And it's something you're going to bring that I have this and I've been working on this. But that sort of rite of passage where we can't feel anyone in the world but ourselves is really actually how we heal that attachment wiring. We heal that attachment trauma, right? Where we really digest. We have a break in connection. We digest that experience, move it through the system, and then we learn to find our voice and our power all on our own in sort of this wide open space. And so, in short, when guys really struggle to like be direct with their truth with a partner, or be direct of like, I'm in love with you, I'm not in love with you, this is not the right thing, I'm not that attractive. When we struggle to be just so direct about this is what's true for me, with a guy, it's because of a mother wound. Okay, how we doing? Fuck, we've been going a while. I might do one more here. We've already been going for an hour. Let me look here. Could you talk about enmeshment? What is it? How do I know when I'm doing it? A lot of what I just covered there. I'll do this, and then there's one more. So there's one other DM I got, and I can end on that one. But yeah, enmeshment, right? It's when we think about like the mother wound or a father wound, we're going to come from an enmeshment wound or a neglect wound. The enmeshment wound is when there's going to be too much of her energetic imprint, in our space, which means that we're going to have a hard time with boundaries. So that there's no form of boundaries. It's really like, we think of enmeshment as like, you think of like a neglect wound is like, a lack of connection or like a distant connection, where enmeshment is like too close of a connection is not healthy, right? That it's an invasion of boundaries. And so how do we heal it is really learning to build boundaries with the feminine. So for example, when you come in a enmeshment wound with mom, learning to speak your truth to the feminine and create boundaries with the feminine, boundaries with mom, speak your truth with mom, also somatically in more of an energetic, emotional process of moving her energy down the left side of your body. And so, and also an enmeshment wound, we're going to be holding on to probably a lot of the emotion and energy that mom imprinted into us. And we are holding on to it as a way to try to alleviate her of her pain and suffering, probably so we could get some unmet need. And so we have to do a lot of energetic clearing. And so there's going to be a lot of energetic boundaries that have to take place where we're not going to take on her stuff and we're going to clear whatever we're holding from her. And so when you create a lot of safety in your system, a lot of what's not yours will begin to go, right? And so boundaries off to the left side of the body, and then clearing her energy down the left side, being boundaried with the imprint of her. And then as you move into relationships, being really discerning with the feminine, because what can happen is when guys have that enmeshment is they can allow women to come into their space without a level of discernment, without being really discerning of like, how do I really feel here? What's my truth? How do I really feel about this person? Where's my boundary here? And so when we feel, and so typically what happens with guys with this enmeshment wound, have a woman who invades the space a little bit. She invades the space a little bit, which creates a really familiar dynamic where the woman probably had an avoidant father and the guy probably had an over-invasive mother. And so it creates this really karmic dynamic where the guy can't be discerning. And so when a guy learns to really be discerning, and relationally, what's really important, and this is something that I've had to like really, really learn to really go slow. Like when you're getting to like really get to know someone and be really, really discerning. I don't mean to be avoidant, standoffish, or to be so protective that your heart's not open, but to be really, really discerning and to really live in the reality of a connection. How do I really feel about this person? And to really protect your space in that process and recognize that a lot of your karma is going to be probably when a woman will come into your space, or as a guy, you'll probably overstep your own integrity. You'll act out of integrity, or you'll overstep your own internal boundaries. You know, maybe you move into a space of fantasy where little boy in you is wanting to be loved, wanting some form of love. And so you actually dishonor your own internal integrity, overstep your own internal boundaries, allow someone in out of integrity, which is things I've done so many times in my past. And it's been a process to learn. But really, as a guy, being discerning with his boundaries, moving slow, and really just learning to speak his truth is how he's going to heal that enmeshment. And that is the process of healing enmeshment. Okay, so the last one here, guys, I'm losing my fucking voice. I don't know if this is so much of a question, but so this woman said, practices advice for grounding when the energy is so fiery and you feel it coursing through your veins and entire system. A full takeover your system. I'm on a TF, twin flame journey, but we are not and have not been in union. I created space from him a couple months ago and he popped back into my energy this week. And when I saw him online, it caused sort of a shock reaction in my nervous system. It wasn't bad. It was just shocking the way it radiated through all of me. It revealed so much to me. I've heard that energetically union can be very difficult physically because the energies coming together are so powerful that you may not have control over your physical self the way you would usually. Do you have experience with that? It's showing me where I still need to center myself. It was like a small preview of what union would or could be like to prepare me, which is good because because if it was in person and not just through a screen, I may have passed out. Sorry this is so long, but also there aren't many out there sharing their experiences the way you are. And it's helping so much to make sense. Any advice on balancing those wild energies, being better prepared for them? Thank you. So do I have experience with this? Yes. Very direct experience. I was in like a karmic spiritual, I've talked about this a lot. When was it from? From early 2021 to early 2023. And thought it was Sacred Union in the beginning, but pretty quickly realized, okay, this was a karmic relationship meant to bring up all this stuff. And the total thing where, yeah, physically our bodies broke down. Like when we would have sex, like our bodies would break down. And it was crazy. Like, you know, had all the shit where like, you know, when we had sex, like, you know, my right shoulder blade turned into an angel wing. Her left shoulder blade turned into an angel wing. And so twin flames and these type of relationships, what they essentially do is they bring up, and I've talked about this at length, the spiritual ego, meaning they bring up the ego in the quantum field, right? And so that's why twin flame relationships don't normally work out, right? Sometimes they do, but normally twin flame relationships don't work out because there's so much ground that you're trying to converge, right? You have so much distance that you're trying to, and so these relationships, typically what they bring up is everywhere inside of us that we've had to fight for love, fight to be seen, but it's difficult because our soul's so understood in a way, but then there's aspects about it where we so don't feel seen. So it's like an amazing soul connection, but it's also not a healthy relationship, right? And so it's a real complex situation. But based off just what your body's telling me. That's very much like a karmic relationship and not a sacred union, because a sacred union relationship will be able to hold the energy, and that the energy that probably will come into our space will be in a way that it's powerful and potent, feels sacred, but it won't break down our body. And so much of what happens when we're in a connection where we break each other down physically, and like people become sick and unwell in the connection, it spikes up the spiritual ego of like, oh my God, like this is our salvation, that we got to make this work, right? And we fight. And this is what happens in twin flames. And we go on this roller coaster of like highs and lows. And it's like a trauma bond of the spirit realm, right? Because it's regulated, dysregulated in our nervous system. Like we can't find a homeostasis. We can't find any balance with it. We can't find any structure or stability. It's also very fantasy-like too. And it breaks us down because we're not ready to hold it. But the thing is that they are catalysts. And so we go through these experiences because they need to evoke certain things inside of us. And so the question was, how do we ground the energy? I have a twin flame that I'm feeling the energy from at a distance, that is coming into my space. I don't know if that's what she said, but how do we ground the energy? And so it sounds like this is not someone we even met in person. Well, to me, it would be like, you know, energetic. And this is me speaking from someone who's been through this process. Everyone has to go through a process. But if it was me, I would say that you need to have energetic boundaries with this person, because what can often happen is that I hear this all the time. People are in twin flames and they can feel someone that's coming into their field. You know, like he keeps coming into my space. He keeps coming into my space. And so with these like twin flames, a lot of times someone's trauma is hooking into us. Someone's trauma is hooking into us. And typically at the time when we go through that twin flame or karmic relationship, we don't have the capacity, safety, or power to actually hold a boundary with it. And so that's why we go on this fucking crazy cocaine ride with this person where our bodies break down and shit. But ultimately, okay, how do we ground and anchor? Well, we actually need to be energetically boundary with this person and be able to hold boundaries and not allow their trauma to hook into us. But again, we have to go through this process of each other's trauma hooking in, trauma bond of the spirit realm, for a certain length of time in order to excavate what we need to excavate. And so that's why when someone's on like a twin flame journey, it's like, you can't really fucking do anything. Like that person's on a ride and they're going to get off when they're ready. You know, that really, really is the fucking truth with someone is like on a karmic spiritual relationship. It's like, they're going to have to learn as many times that they have to learn. And it's got to become this self-discovery that they get to. It's what I've learned through working with so many people and clients who are in these types of relationships, is ultimately you have to respect their process, because when I went through it so many times, because you had to get a certain amount, you had to get a certain amount of energy that was excavated in your space. You had to have a certain amount of energy that was excavated in your space. I've been feeling it may be karmic, but I didn't want to admit it. You're confirming what I know, and that is all happening to catalyze me. I appreciate you. Can't do anything but surrender to the lessons, be grateful for the growth it brought. So the reason why I'm responding to that question in the middle is because this was the lovely lady who DM'd me that question. And so she was just saying that she's been feeling the relationship is karmic, but she didn't want to admit it. Yes, when I was in my situation, I held on to for a long time that this was the love of my life, that this was my spiritual divinity, that this was my soulmate, that this was my sacred union. But deep, deep underneath, right, in the deepest layer of myself, I knew ultimately it wouldn't last. I knew ultimately it wouldn't work. I knew ultimately it was a karmic connection, and that the way that our traumas intersected just wasn't healthy. And that at least at the point that we were at, and I don't think ever, we're in a place where we'd be able to heal together. And very quickly knew deep underneath that we were meant to catalyze and exasperate certain aspects of shadow and trauma that needed to come to the surface, and that our contract was to kind of trigger and catalyze those pieces internally, And then when we were ready to move out of that contract, when we were ready to move off that timeline, we'd say goodbye, which is exactly what happened. And so this woman's question that I read out, it's definitely a karmic relationship. Almost always twin flames are karmic spiritual relationships and not soulmates. This is what this spiritual, twin flames are usually talked about by the ungrounded spiritual community, just so everyone knows. Twin flames are a trauma bond of the spirit realm, but they're necessary, right? And many times when we come into our spiritual power, we have to experience a twin flame. Not always, but it's a big way that we catalyze a lot of past life shit, generational stuff. But when your body can't hold the connection, it is not a sacred union. When your body can't hold the connection, it is not a sacred union. It's a karmic relationship. And again, a sacred union is a relationship you can hold at the right time. So maybe that person who's breaking down your body, maybe one day could be a sacred union, but right now it's a karmic relationship. I do believe that karmic relationships can turn into more sacred relationships. I think it's really difficult to happen, and it doesn't happen very often, but I think it's possible. But usually the karmic relationships, because usually how a relationship starts is how it ends. Usually how a relationship is in the beginning is usually the relationship that the dynamic that is created in the beginning is the dynamic that continues to persist in the relationship. The only way that we can really change that dynamic is by breaking up, letting each other go, having the break and rupture, fully moving that through the body, and then coming together as two new people, as two people that have grown. I've seen that happen. I've seen that happen with lots of couples who come together and try to change their dynamic while they're together, but ultimately had to break up for at least a year to be able to do a certain amount of growth and come back together. And so, yeah, that connection is a karmic relationship. So just for everyone knows, if your body's breaking down and you're being so ungrounded by a connection, that's not a sacred union. That's not your fucking soulmate. It's not your fucking soulmate because it's not fucking healthy. If they're making you sick and ill, it's not fucking healthy, right? But so much of the spiritual ego is like, I got to make this work. I got to learn to hold this. And I thought that for the longest time. And then when I learned to integrate that, which is what took my integration embodiment to the next level and my work as a spiritual teacher, it moved me into a whole new paradigm. And it literally I totally got a total prototype for God and the divine in the body when I learned to integrate that from that spiritual industry. And so when so much of the spiritual industry talks about relationships pre-divine, they haven't actually experienced the rupture in order to truly get to the crown opening of the divine and sacred union. So much of the ungrounded spiritual community, when they talk about sacred union, they're actually talking about karmic relationships. They're talking about a connection that is pre-divine internally inside of yourself. How do you deal with negativity from others in the spiritual community? I find the community to be very hive mind. How do I deal with negativity? So negativity, well, typically people who are negative towards me in the spiritual industry just unfollow me. They just remove themselves from my space. And I think I'm pretty lucky in the sense that people just remove themselves. I have a very polarizing, strong energy, and just I'm very strong in how I see and view things and my opinions around that. And so I think just I'm immediately very triggering to people in the spiritual industry. So I don't really get that much backlash from people in the spiritual industry. They remove themselves from my space and they're not even in my paradigm. And so one thing that will happen as you get stronger in your own embodiment is that you usually get less pushback because you've really strengthened your sort of fortitude and your embodiment and your grounding and your integration in your space. And so I occasionally get pushback, and I don't really give a fuck because I'm so I have such strong conviction in the way that I see things. It's pretty much immovable. And so when I get pushback, I'm like, I don't give a fuck. Like, say whatever you want. Like, go fuck yourself. You know what I mean? But I don't really get a lot because they usually just sort of see themselves out the door. And I want to show up in a way where people just hang out with my energy for a little bit. And they're like, well, I don't like this. This is not for me. Right. And in turn, what that does, it allows me to magnetize more of the aligned people into my space. And so that's usually how I try to operate. But so many people in the quote unquote spiritual industry, yeah, as you say, hive mind, it's kind of like glorified high school dynamics. Everyone just cares about being rich and building these abundant businesses off very like surface spiritual practices and principles. And it's not really that authentic or transparent. And it seems like a lot of time people like try to like get healed just enough or do just enough spiritual practice to be able to like make an abundant course that can make them millions of dollars. And so like, I really don't like most of the spiritual communities because they do have that hive mind. And I'm very much the type of person where whenever people go left, I go right. Whenever everyone's wearing green, I wear pink. You know, I've always been that way, which in turn has led to me kind of being more of like this outside renegade rebel a little bit. But I really like spiritual people who are funny, who have a great sense of humor, who are just really, really authentic and like don't give a fuck and don't take themselves too seriously. And so, yeah, the stronger you get in your space, the less pushback you're going to get and less people fuck with you because they're like, yeah, I'm just going to like see myself at the door because I don't like this guy's energy. Will you do comedy sketches again? 100%. Admirable Akbar CEO. I like that. Yes, I really want to do comedy sketches again on my YouTube channel, which is going to be a big focus moving forward. Eventually, I'm going to get back to more like cinematic content. I'm going to have my podcast eventually. And comedy sketches is something, you know, because I want to shoot comedy sketches about polarity, about relationships, about spirituality. Like I want to do so much about this. And I can't wait for that to happen. So those will come back eventually soon. And it's going to be a lot of fun when they do. All right, guys, I think I'm going to leave it there. I've been talking for almost an hour and a half. And I got to go to a dinner pretty soon. It's Friday night here in Toronto. So thank you, everyone, for showing up and watching this live, this Q&A. Here we are, November 1st, talking about all this crazy portal the past 2 months. I think I'm going to keep doing these Q&As a lot more often and just talk about what's happening in this portal, this space, and see what people are dealing with. So you guys, if you resonate with this, please give this video a like, subscribe to my channel, send this to a friend who couldn't be here live, who might fucking resonate with something that I did or talked about. And let me know in the comments, you guys, what resonated with you from this video, what stood out, what landed. And I'm sending love to everyone. And just be gentle with yourself through this process as we enter the divine. As we enter the divine and become a divine being. Don't worry, guys. It is coming. It is coming. All right, everyone. Have a lovely weekend, and we will see you guys soon. My voice is gone. Bye, everyone.